Hi, my name is Naomi, and I was the director at Starfish from March 2012 to September 2013. And I'm here to talk about what actually happened at Starfish. Just a quick review, Starfish was a large foster home for Chinese orphans in Xian, China. And it was started by the amazing Amanda DeLange. She had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. When she left to the US, I had taken over. In January of 2013, given the reason that there was a nearby fire, Starfish was closed. All the children were sent back to the orphanage. I'm here to tell what really happened, and I hate getting on this hamster wheel of self-defense, but I do feel that there needs to be I need to tell my side of the story. And I also, there's also, because there's so much on the internet and it keeps kind of popping up into my life, I just need to address this. I know that there were a lot of rumors about what happened. There was a huge amount of gossip. And I would ask that you would please listen to my side of the story, and hopefully you will gain a different perspective. That's me behind the thanks sign. I have been in China since 2004. My entire time here, I've been working with orphaned, vulnerable children, special needs education, all of that in various capacities. And I had known Amanda since about 2007. Amanda, sometimes when she blew through Beijing, she would stay with me. I had done a 1-week volunteer stint at Starfish in October of 2011. And, Amanda and I were friends, and we'd spent a lot of time talking about Starfish and orphan issues and all that. So when I found out that Amanda was sick, I was able to get a leave of absence from my job. When I got to Starfish and saw what a mess it was, I ended up quitting my job and moving permanently to Xi'an. Here's the bomb. Of the 168 children who came to Starfish under Amanda, 41 of them died. That's a 24.6 mortality rate. No child has died under my care. Not at Starfish, not anywhere else. I've had a total of 60 orphans under my care. None of them have died. Amanda was amazing. She was all about love. She was very blunt. She was like a moving tornado. She also had very poor judgment, and the tornado thing was good and bad. That she got a lot done, but she was also, a bit chaotic. And, as Starfish grew, it really became something that it was a burden that it was too high, too much for her to bear. And the needs of Starfish were not a good match for Amanda's skill set. So Amanda started Starfish in 2005. She had been volunteering at the orphanage, and there were some cleft palate babies there were 6 cleft palate babies that she took home. Now, if you know anything about cleft palate babies, they can be really, really difficult to feed. And, sometimes you're like kind of reaching the point where you're using an eyedropper to feed them. So Amanda had enlisted the help of friends and neighbors, and, there were volunteers, and there's a big aerospace industry in Xi'an, and so there were trailing spouses and local volunteers, and she hired some nannies, and then they added more children, and that kind of grew, and there were just more and more children added, more and more people involved, and eventually the neighbors started to complain because of all the traffic, and a new solution they had, I think, 4 apartments, and it was like right in the middle of the city. But a new solution had to be found. And it was found in this home that was pretty far outside of the city. It was between the airport and the city. And it was a beautiful home. It's actually used to be, I understand it used to be a brothel, to my surprise. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And, there was a lot of renovation that needed to be done. There was a lot of money raised and volunteers coming out and doing a lot of, very, very hard work to get the home into shape. And the end result was beautiful. It was, these red pillars, these, glass topped atriums. It was really a gorgeous, gorgeous facility, but it was really, really far outside of town. So, first of all, you had like the trailing spouses that in the city, they would come by a couple times a week, and all of a sudden they would carpool out once a week. And there were problems with, we had security guards who were just drunk all the time. That was a problem. It was far from the hospital. There were a lot of just pragmatic things that were wrong, that were difficult because of its location. And it was also at this new location where the babies started to die like flies. When I first got to Xian in March of 2012, it was overrun with roaches. It was filthy. And there were rats in the kitchen. There were children who had bed sores, and there were kids who would spend the entire day in bed. It was just really, really bad shape. And I don't know why Amanda not being there allowed it to get as bad as it did, but it did. It was very bad. Just as an example, there was one cupboard and in one of the kids' rooms, and it was it was that big. It was, and that's where the bottles and the formula were kept. And it was just, I went in to clean it because I just saw these roaches in there. And when I was cleaning, I counted 115 roaches in this one cabinet. And this was like roaches jumping and running up my arm. And I had the nannies were standing behind me giggling the whole time. And this was the closest I ever got to just turning around and walking home. But it was pretty bad. And there was another problem, and I was told this like straight away with the kids. And if you ever deal with puppies, the way you socialize puppies is that you kind of pick them up and you expose them to a lot of people, and they lose their autonomy, and in this way they get socialized. And I was literally told that that's what they were doing at Starfish, that they were, because the kids were going to be adopted, we wanted to make sure that they would be fine with strangers. And so they kind of had taken that approach to that's how they treated the children. There were also the children who died. Now, there were some children who were, Amanda took on some hard kids and they were going to die anyways. But there were also a lot of children who I would say died in their sleep. And Amanda and I had a long talk about this. And this was something that, even Amanda was saying was a management problem, where she couldn't get the feedback. She didn't have enough. She didn't know the kids on a day-to-day level well enough to know when they were off. Kids don't just die. There's always signs. And, and I would also say that wherever you've got, whenever you're looking at a foster home where kids are just dying in their sleep, you will find the director absent. And that was actually quite true with Amanda, because she was out a lot, and there were so many kids, she just didn't really know what was going on with all of them. Now, there was also, right after I got there was this little boy that I'll call Baby X. And we had a volunteer who was very, very reckless and nearly killed him. We got him rushed to the hospital, and within 10 minutes of arriving at the hospital, he was in shock. But we were okay, and he, because we were at the hospital, so we were fine, and he ended up having to have a surgery. And it turned out okay, but what shocked me was the attitude of the people at Starfish of, like, why are you angry about this? And, you hurt the volunteers' feelings. And, but there was nothing, it wasn't that he almost died, didn't really seem to bother anybody. Now, for the orphan deaths, I had talked with Civil Affairs, much later, and I found out that they did know how high the mortality rate was, but they were very limited with what they could do. And this is because Starfish was supported by, this very large aerospace industry in Xi'an, and they were trying to, work out some fixes. And, Amanda had like a special baby room, but, Amanda, was saying that it was really more of a management problem. And there were children who were not going to make it. But the truth is, no one cares about a dead orphan. They can't be adopted. Volunteers can't play with them. And they're more where they come from. There was a lot of chaos at Starfish. And it was really, how do you go from a 25% mortality rate to 0 almost overnight? And you do that by pissing off the people who are profiting off the chaos. I would describe Starfish as a human petting zoo. And I'll tell you, when I was a volunteer, that it was a petting zoo, it was great. As a director, it drove me crazy. It was a complete free-for-all. People would come in and they would bring like bags of candy and hand them out to the candy, and there was no regulation, there was no check-in, there was no accountability. Regularly, volunteers would chase down a child and pick them up against their will. There was a window, an indoor window that had a changing booth, and you needed the light from the window, and crowds would stand around and watch a diaper change, which I just thought was very inappropriate. Children were having their photos taken non-stop. We would have like these amateur photographers who would come in and spend a whole day practicing taking pictures on the kids, and the kids had reached a point where they were completely indifferent to having their photos taken. There was no part of the home that was off limits to volunteers, which meant the kids had no safe place, and the children had no autonomy. They had no control over themselves. They didn't even have like a choice in, like what clothes they would wear. That was something I tried to do, where with the nannies, like, here's 2 shirts. Do you want to wear the red one or the blue one? And, kind of start giving them some sort of choice. But at that point, there was nothing. And I appreciated the work that Amanda was doing, but how it was being done needed to change. And I saw my job as taking the chaos and making order out of it. And I didn't want to be there long term. I had told the board that I would be there up to 2 years. And my goal was to pass it on, hopefully to, I thought it would be a great retirement job for a couple where one of them is medical and the other one is administrative. Now, Starfish was very adoption focused, and everything was all about getting the child ready for adoption, which is like treating them like a puppy. And they also sees adoption as the only alternative. There was quantity over quality, and the kids were basically warehoused, and they were all treated. They were warehoused. There was no attention really spent towards the kids with special needs. And it was the immediate over the long term. And this especially played out with the dental care. The kids were put to bed with warm bottles of milk, and that rotted their teeth, and a lot of them still have dental problems because of this. They were way too accustomed to strangers. And the philosophy was that the children would catch up after adoption, which they generally do. And adoption focus welcomes a large number of volunteers, which, there is a place for a large number of volunteers, but not a constant flow. And orphan care, which is a little bit different, as evaluating the needs of a child on an individual basis. So a child that has, who's deaf would be treated, differently. A child who is blind, would be given different parameters, because the infant brain, this is such a vital time of a child's life that you really need to address these special needs, while they are infants. Usually adoption is the best option, but not always. And there needs to be, a need for special needs education, physical therapy, long-term care. These are all factors that need to be brought in. And you strive to reach normal milestones. You're not going to, not an institutional child, but you strive to reach that. And you're very selective, and you have high expectations for your volunteers. One practice that Starfish was involved in that I don't think any other home was involved in was the voluntourism. And voluntourism is where somebody would pay, the voluntourism company picks them up from the airport, takes them to the orphanage, and then trots them out to see the terracotta soldiers. And I would say most of the volunteers from the voluntourism company were pretty fantastic. They were really good and really engaged with what they wanted to do. But it doesn't change that a voluntourism company is a business, and people are buying a particular experience. And to buy this experience, the children need to be malleable, and they need to be infantized, and children are commodified. That's just the nature of orphanage voluntourism. There was also something really fishy about the voluntourism company. Just doing pencil to paper, they were making up to $10,000 a month off of Starfish. And on the website, it said that they would be giving Starfish $75 a week per volunteerist. However, Starfish received none of that money, zero, zip, nada, none of it. And I went through the records. There was nothing ever received. The thing that I thought was super weird was that Starfish was paying for their lunches, which, given how tight Amanda was for money, and just the whole situation, that Starfish would be paying for the volunteers' lunches, and volunteers, would pay for their own lunch, but not the people from this company. Now, there was a Starfish volunteer who managed the relationship, but she actually promoted the interest of the voluntourism company to the expense of the children. And I really, really lost it when the Starfish volunteer instructed me to end the preschool because the volunteers wanted to play with the kids. There was also no contract, which was also weird. Now, I tried to talk to Amanda about this, but at this point, Amanda was she was too far gone. She was too loopy. And I couldn't find anybody to give me any clarity on this whole voluntourism relationship because it just simply didn't make sense. Now, the volunteers, and I'm not going to say just people from a volunteers company, but a volunteerist is somebody who's there to do what they want. They want to play with the kids and take pictures. And a volunteer is somebody who's going to do the work that needs to be done. You know, if cleaning needs to be done, they're going to do that. You know, they're willing to do it. And they're willing to spend time to, you know, learn the children and, you know, be engaged with them and do cleaning when necessary. And they're also offering, you know, friendship and wisdom. So there I was. I'd quit my job. I had moved permanently to Xi'an, and I got started to get things changed. First thing I did was get the cleaning kits together for each room and get a cleaning schedule so people knew what to do and they had the tools to do it. We also had cleaning kits for the hospital that when a child was checked into the hospital, they had to clean the area, they had to clean the bed, they had to clean the area around the bed, the wall, the table next to it, because these beds could actually be pretty dirty. None of the children were potty trained, even though some of them were almost 4 years old. And thanks to a lovely organization, we were able to get toilets and sinks donated. We also started the preschool for the older kids. A local dental clinic, they had some people from the local dental clinic come in and do a training with our nannies where they were teaching them how to care for children's teeth and why they needed to care for the children's teeth the way that they did. We ended the practice of the babies sleeping with the warm milk in their mouths, that to end not only the bottle rot, but when we stopped doing that, we also had just pretty much eliminated the cockroach problem in the kids' rooms. A local Catholic nun started coming in once a week to do physical therapy on the kids who needed physical therapy. I was talking with a nutritionist in Shanghai about getting the kids, you know, how to get more vegetables integrated into the children's diets because they had a pretty white diet. And this woman, Jiang Hong, is, if you know deaf education in China, you would know her. She runs a school. She was featured in this book, Orphan Justice. She came out for a week and did training with the nannies on how to do sign language with the babies. And it was great. It was great for the kids. It was great for the nannies. At the nanny's request, we started doing English lessons, introducing pets to the kids. This is my cat, Natalie, who wasn't very happy about this, but she did comply. And we started doing the 80s dance parties first thing in the morning in the cafeteria, which I loved. It was the best. This was Julia. Julia was left at our doorstep in November of 2013, and she was one of our new babies. And this is baby Ross, and he was also another baby that was added while I was at Starfish. I wasn't keen on adding children until we had very solid systems in place. And as I saw my job, it was happening. We were getting a lot more order going on, getting pretty close to the goal of handing it over. And I was pretty happy with the progress that was being made. Now, there were a lot of problems with staff and volunteers, and that's always going to happen whenever you have a change. Whenever you have a change in management, especially when when big changes are happening. But there were a lot of scams going on, and some of them were more obvious than others. And I had to fire some people, some because they were lazy, some for lying. there were people that were unhappy with me, and they had falsely accused me of stealing, but you know, I didn't. Obviously, I didn't steal, and I had a strong paper trail. And when that failed, which was very embarrassing for them, they just started to create chaos. They would come less frequently, but when they did, they would create a lot of chaos. And some of them had gone to Chinese social media, which all this is it's unchallenged. They can say anything on Chinese social media. They approached the donors, and they had successfully campaigned with civil affairs to shut down Starfish. Now, I didn't know this until months after Starfish was closed. And I didn't even know what was on Chinese social media until a few months ago. When Starfish closed, at that point, the orphanage had made huge improvements. And it was something I could have fought, but I wasn't going to. The distance from the hospital was too far. The lease, the rent was weird and expensive. And, you know, also that the head of security was the landlord's uncle, and he and his buddies were just always drunk. The volunteer problems were never going to go away. I was exhausted, and I was tired from no time off, and I was tired of fighting with people. I was tired of no privacy, and I was desperately lonely. But I am very proud of the work that I did there. Now, I'm kind of going back before I had arrived. The volunteers had done a lot of, when Amanda fell ill, Amanda didn't have insurance, which is really the fault of the board. The board should have made sure she had insurance. But they went on a massive media-driven fundraising campaign, and they raised about $50,000 US towards Amanda's medical care, which turned out they didn't need because Amanda's medical care had been donated. But this also brought a lot of attention to Starfish and orphan issues. There was a lot of you know, media coverage, TV cameras coming by, and all that. And this was completely against the agreement with the orphanage. The orphanage was very big that there was not to be any publicity around Starfish. And you may ask why, because, you know, that doesn't make any sense. But the reality is that the child abandonment rate in Xian immediately went up 2.5 times after the big media blitz on Starfish. And this has a lot to do with how decisions are made on abandonment issues. And you know, this way people could say, oh, if I abandon my child, you know, they'll be well cared for, and they'll be adopted and go to America and have a happy life. I think if Amanda had known this, it would have broken her heart. The Voluntourism Company, right after, like, days within the children being returned, had gone to the Xian orphanage, and the Starfish volunteer was, and you know, heavily involved in arranging the meetings and the conditions of the Voluntourism Company. And she again managed a voluntourist. After a few months, they were kicked out of the orphanage for several reasons. I had a talk with Director Wong, and the whole thing to him was very dodgy. Because it was dodgy. And I looked on the website, and the company no longer offers placements in orphanages for ethical reasons. Yeah. So here's the big question. Between January 2011 and March 2012, 13 children died, and no one said a word. From my arrival in March 2012 to Starfish's closing in 2013, no children died. Why were they so keen to go back to the way Amanda was doing things? This presentation could have been 100 hours long, which I'm sure you're glad that it wasn't. But it's just a tip of the iceberg of what happened. There's a lot that I left out. If you have any questions, please contact me. I would prefer that you not go on social media challenging things, because if you do, I'll go right back and post documents. And but it was, it was quite the experience. I'd like to just remember the children who died at Starfish, the 41 babies. Thank you for listening.